stop offshore wind turbines on Toronto's waterfront. Thank you for visiting SaveTheTorontoBluffs.com. This website is sponsored by a group of Toronto citizens who are concerned about the industrialization of the eastern Toronto waterfront, in particular the environmentally sensitive Scarborough Bluffs, an Ontario heritage site. The website is formatted to explain the cause of our concern, outline some facts that should be considered in understanding the situation, discuss our concerns based on these facts and ask for your help in stopping this venture by Toronto Hydro. For those of you not familiar with the beauty and fragility of the Scarborough Bluffs, we have also included a photo gallery and book of pictures of the bluffs. Our concerns. Are you concerned about the effects of wind farms on the Toronto waterfront? Below are some of the possible effects. A wind turbine project makes no economic sense. It spends an enormous amount of taxpayer money on a project that would provide very little electricity that we would then have to pay very high rates for. A wind turbine project has the potential to damage the environment, to the lake bed, to the water which we drink, to the migrations of birds, bats and the threatened monarch butterflies, to the resident populations of birds and wild animals that inhabit the shoals along Lake Ontario. A wind turbine project would threaten the very fragile, unique bluffs. A wind turbine project would industrialize a beautiful recreational area where people currently walk, jog, kayak, sail and spend time enjoying the natural surroundings. A giant turbine project would negatively affect the daily lives of thousands of Toronto citizens with massive construction effects, ongoing noise, uninterrupted flashing lights and potential health hazards. The cause of our concern. Toronto Hydro and their consultant Gardner Lee is considering the feasibility of putting an industrial wind farm 2 to 4 kilometers off Toronto's eastern shore. If wind speeds prove favorable, the proposed plan would see 400-foot wind turbines, with flashing beacons in Lake Ontario. The 60 to 100 turbines proposed for this area would require a 52 square kilometer area. This would potentially span a 25-kilometer stretch of prime beach, parkland, and residential areas, along the shore of Lake Ontario. The turbines could encompass an area from Leslie Street to Ajax. Although it is important that Ontario develops new ways to harvest green energy, it must be done in a way that protects the environment and respects the rights of all our citizens. We do not believe that this initiative meets either of these requirements. The facts: the world needs more green power. We strongly support well-considered initiatives to this end. The province of Ontario has a green power initiative but has no guidelines and does not regulate where wind farms are located. The Ontario Power Authority, OPA, was established through the Electricity Restructuring Act. It operates independently and is a non-profit corporation. Licensed by the Ontario Energy Board, it reports to the legislature through the Ministry of Energy. The OPA is responsible for assessing the long-term adequacy of electricity resources, forecasting future demand and the potential for conservation and renewable energy, preparing an integrated system plan for conservation, generation, and transmission, procuring new supply, transmission and demand management either by competition or by contract, when necessary, achieving the targets set by government for conservation and renewable energy. The OPA has commissioned a number of studies on the topic of wind farms in Ontario. At least 2 of these studies were completed by Halimax Consulting Incorporated. The most recent is a study of the opportunities for offshore wind farms in Ontario published in April 2008, only 8 months ago. This study determined the 64 best locations for offshore wind farms in Ontario, including 7 sites on Lake Ontario. The 64 sites, when developed, would potentially provide 35,000 megawatt of power. The Ontario goal for 2025 is 5,000 megawatt. The study also provided some guidelines for offshore sites, the least favorable being near an area with a population density of 64 people per square km or greater. A less favorable site is 1 to 3 kilometers from shore, most favorable is 9 or more kilometers from shore. The Scarborough Bluffs site selected by Toronto Hydro is not one of the 64 sites recommended in the Halimax study. It is also located beside a residential area with a population density over 1,000 per square kilometre, and it is located 2 kilometres from shore. According to the data in the Halimax study in the Canadian Wind Atlas, there does not appear to be sufficient wind at the Scarborough Bluffs site to support a wind farm. This is true for the whole year, but particularly true in the critical summer period. The Pickering Wind Station, located at the shore of Lake Ontario and at the eastern extreme of the proposed wind farm, has been in operation since August 2001. According to the Ontario Power Generation backgrounder on this installation, this 18% capacity factor is low compared to other forms of generation and results mainly from the lack of constant strong winds. Other areas in Ontario have been found to have much stronger wind regimes. Toronto Hydro is proposing to spend $1 million in taxpayers' funds to study the winds at one specific point in the proposed wind farm area and has leased the land for the wind farm from the MNR. The proposed study site is 1.8 kilometers from land, therefore not actually within the defined boundaries of the proposed wind farm. The Scarborough Bluffs site will be the closest to shore offshore wind farm in the world and the only one built in close proximity to a major residential area. The wind turbines are more than 120 meters tall with a substantial underwater base to support the structure. As an example of the size of the base, the onshore Pickering Wind Generation Station required 318 tons of steel-reinforced concrete for its foundation. This base will need to be tied to the lake bottom in some fashion. These turbines will be topped by navigational and aviation warning lights that will be flashing all day and all night. Although it is Toronto Hydro who is doing the preliminary study, it will not be funding, building or operating the wind farm. A private company will be doing this after a tendering process run by one of the provincial power authorities or Toronto Hydro. An example of a private company is Canadian Renewable Energy Corporation, a subsidiary of Canadian Hydro Developers. They run the Wolf Island project among a number of others. There are other companies operating in Canada. These private companies can take on these projects because there is a standing offer from the OPA to purchase the power for the next 20 years at $110 per megawatt generated. We understand that this price is adjusted periodically for inflation. There is also a federal initiative that provides $10 per megawatt generated for the first 10 years of production. This is extremely expensive power. Ontario Power Generation sells its power generated at $33 per megawatt hour for hydro and $49.50 per megawatt hour for nuclear. The Scarborough Bluffs are an environmentally sensitive area. The Toronto Conservation Authority has spent millions of dollars to reduce the rate of erosion of the bluffs. This work is only partially completed. This erosion directly impacts the houses located along the top of the bluffs. Toronto Hydro has stated any further projects, i.e., an offshore wind farm, are subject to a separate environmental assessment process with full agency and public participation. John Gerretsen, the Environment Minister in Ontario, has publicly stated there are currently 19 projects on the go in the province. Full environmental assessments were requested in 17 of these projects. Not one was granted. According to Mr. Gerretsen, we have enough information regarding the major issues involved. There is no need to do these assessments. Wind power is not a steady source of power. The existing wind turbines in Ontario reached a high output of 617 megawatts in early December. On July 19, the wind turbines reached a low output of 2 megawatts. Wind power does not replace the need for existing power generation sources. Nowhere in the world has an existing power plant been shut down and replaced by wind generation. The Scarborough Bluffs are part of the Atlantic Flyway, a major spring and fall migratory route for many species of birds. It is also the migratory route for monarch butterflies. All of Ontario's industrial wind turbine installations have been in rural or wilderness Ontario. For rural sites, there is a very strong economic reason to support the turbines. Each landowner who hosts a wind turbine receives a lease payment of $9,000, $13,000 per year plus a break on their hydro bill. Not surprisingly, the hosts are very strong proponents of the turbines. The Scarborough Bluffs are as high as 65 meters above the lake level at their highest point. The wind turbines are over 100 meters high, possibly creating a very different sound issue than experienced with the land-based turbines. With the likelihood of no environmental assessment before proceeding, this issue will not be addressed but should be. The well-being of the hundreds of affected homeowners along the bluffs should be of concern to the proponents of the turbines. Opposition. We believe that there are a number of concerned green voices in this argument that are taking a very basic argument that wind power is green and good and applying this argument to any proposal by any agency to say that the project should proceed whatever the facts might be.